Ireland, when I turned pro, they were happy that there was an Irish pro back on the road. And it wasn't about, they didn't care how good or how bad I was. It was great for them to see another Roche in the peloton. And it was almost a success, at least for Ireland. Yes, at the very beginning, even when I did interviews, it was like, oh, what's it like to be your dad's son? I was like, well, one, I don't know any better because that's how it's always been. And two, I quickly realised that growing up in Ireland, even when I went to play rugby, I was only good at rugby because I was my dad's son, so it was better to accept it than to fight it.
Joining us in the studio today is an Irish former professional road racer. He has twice been national champion and twice finished in the top 10 of the Vuelta, winning stages in 2013 and 2015. He's ridden in 24 Grand Tours and has had 65 top 10 finishes. He's represented Ireland in 4 Summer Olympics. And he's competed for Ireland 14 times in the Road World Championships. Please welcome Nico Roche. Nico, hey, how are you doing?
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, so good to see you. Where are you calling in from today?
Escondido, just north of San Diego.
What brings you there?
I'm racing on Sunday the Belgium waffle race, the San Diego one, so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, Nico, I know you're familiar with the show. You've seen a couple episodes. You've seen the format. What we like to do in the beginning is just start with some of the basics, childhood stuff. So let's just jump in, all right? You ready?
Sure, yeah.
So for us, our audience around the world listening in or watching on YouTube, where were you born?
I was born in Paris.
Born in Paris, but your accent isn't really French, right?
No, so born in Paris, moved directly to Ireland as a kid. It was just because, so my mum's French, and obviously back then she just wanted to give birth where her family was. So born in France, moved back to Ireland, and then 2 years later when my little sister was born, we did exactly the same thing. Went back to France for a couple of months and then moved back to Ireland. I kind of stayed in Ireland till I was about 5, 6, and then I came back in France for elementary school till I was 10. And then at the age of 11, went back to Ireland till the age of 15 and eventually made it back to France for the last time when I was 15. And then I've kind of moved around. When I turned professional, went to Switzerland, Italy, Spain, and then Monaco. So I've been moving, and lots of the accents are completely gone.
It's a fun mixture, though. So your mom's French. That means your dad's Irish, right?
Yes.
And what did your parents do when you were growing up?
So my mom was she did a couple of things. When we were in France, she was a real estate agent. When we went back to Ireland, she had a luxury clothes shop in the center of Dublin. And then the last few times she's been doing different jobs. When we moved back to France when I was 15, my parents had involved with some other friends into a hotel venture in south of France. So my mom was helping running that. And then my dad was he was cycling around the world for for a good few years. And when the later years of his life, he had the training camps in Mallorca, which unfortunately closed just a couple of years ago, just before COVID. And then he's been ongoing, just doing brand ambassadorship and working with different identities in cycling, helping out at the moment in Hungary with developing cycling in Hungary.
It sounds like you might be downplaying the career of your father. Was he a successful bike racer in his day?
He was quite successful. Actually, only 2 riders managed to do what he did. So what they call the Triple Crown, which is the Worlds, the Tour of Italy and the Tour de France in the same year. So him and Merckx. And actually, thankfully for me, he was that good, because I quickly realized that if he wasn't that good, I'd be compared for the whole of my life. Where there's a moment where, because he was that good, it was like, he's in a different league anyway, so just stop comparing. I can be a good rider, but just never as good as this guy who's been world champion, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. We just had Axel Merckx on the show. And so a funny parallel, right? To have a father with a successful career and the influence. Even still, you guys are in different leagues. I can imagine that in your, when you started to become successful, there was still some family pressure, wasn't there?
There was. I think I've talked a lot with Axel over the years. We've bumped into each other, and I strongly know and believe that he had a lot more pressure than I ever had, actually. I think it was more from the country itself. Ireland, when I turned pro, they were happy that there was an Irish pro back on the road. And it wasn't about, they didn't care how good or how bad I was. It was great for them to see another Roche in the peloton. And it was almost a success, at least for Ireland. I had pressure coming over when I went to the French teams. And obviously my dad was living in France during his career and very appreciated in France. And it was kind of more the pro. My first teams were always saying, "Oh, he's never going to be as good as his dad." Then I realized, I said, "Well, I'm never going to be, and very few are going to be as good." So I kind of have to get on with it. Where I know Axel had a lot more pressure all the time, just because also it was a different era. It was well, I think I did when Axel probably stopped just about when I turned pro. I might have done 1 year with him. So again, 10 years before that was also 10 years backwards in time and closer to the older generation.
Right.
When I turned pro, few of the mechanics, a few of the guys that were still in the business had worked with my dad, and obviously they would kind of compare, and the general public. But you get bored of bringing people down, though. So they're not going to tell me every year, "Oh, he's never going to be as good as his dad. Oh, he's never going to be as you say it once, you say it twice, and then that's it." So
Yeah.
at least having had 17 years in World Tour cycling, yes, at the very beginning, even when I did interviews, it was like, "Oh, what's it like to be your dad's son?" I was like, "Well, one, I don't know any better because that's how it's always been, and two, I quickly realized that growing up in Ireland, even when I went to play rugby, I was only good at rugby because I was my dad's son, so it was better to accept it than to fight it."
Let's stay in your childhood for a moment. You just mentioned rugby, and I always like to know, what types of activities you were into as a kid. Were you into cycling? Were you into soccer, football? What'd you do before you discovered the bike?
So my mum was she was a runner as a kid, so she put me into running. She was and beside where we were living, she still had her historical club. So my kind of first club when I was 7 was running. So that's what I do. I did cross country, and then 800-meter running on the track. From there, all my friends at school were playing soccer or tennis or something a little bit more. Well, tennis is not as social, but as soccer. But I was okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna drop the running and go into play soccer with my friends. So I kind of picked up soccer. I even tried judo. I tried ice skating. I tried a bunch of sports, and soccer was fun. I enjoyed it because of the fun element, and I would still do running with the school. They always had those kind of school championships, so that was fine. And then from there, for me, cycling, I lived in a very small village about 30, 40 minutes away from Paris. And the only place to get from A to B was your parents or by bike. And lucky
Right.
enough, traffic in the 80s was nothing as bad as compared to now. So when you're living in a small village, to go for your after school, kick the ball around in your mate's garden, well, we could, it was safe enough for us to use the bike. And it was, for me, cycling at that time was freedom, basically. Until we moved back to Ireland when I was 12, just turning 12. And so starting the year of school, and so moved there in September, and it was just my dad was like, "Oh, I'm going up to give these awards. It's been of the year league. It's the final race, and there's an underage race. Do you want to go and try it?" I was like, "Well, sure, why not?" So I took my mum's bike. We stopped on the way, bought a pair of shoes and a helmet in one of my dad's friend's shop in Dublin, in Dundrum, and then went to the race. Finished second, and I said, "Oh, Dad, can I ask Santa for a bike for Christmas?" And that's how I kind of started going in a little bit more into the cycling world. But back then, I still played soccer, and then I dropped soccer and played rugby when I went to Blackrock College. I had no choice; I had to do track and field and rugby, and then I also cycled. Eventually, I did my cruciate ligament, and then I couldn't do any other sport than cycling. But it's funny how tight timing sometimes also one goes into the other. Where I did my cruciate ligaments, and my parents had just decided to move back to France. So when I was 15, and when I moved back to France, back then, rugby was always okay inside of France, but it wasn't huge because they hadn't won the World Cup yet. It was still like rugby was kicking off. Well, of course, the Stade de France and Toulouse or whatever, but not as whole glory for the country. People they'd follow the Six Nations, but that was about it. There was not much rugby going on in there, and plus I could not get an operation because I was too young. So basically, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go on a bike and train more. And obviously, I went from training 2 times a week to 5 or 6 times a week. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I'm actually going to be not so bad. And I won all the races in the summer in south of France. I was like, well, I think next year I'm just going to focus on cycling. And that's kind of started. And then it was also the years of like juniors and all that. And then kind of focus a little bit more around cycling. And then I also kind of had my passion for it just got bigger as well.
Nico, what you mentioned you had a little sister. What does she do and where is she in the world?
So my sister, she was the last one to leave Ireland. Actually, she well followed us around and then went to France. We finished her school in France, and then she went to university to Canada, and she spent 2 years in Bishop, and then went back to France for a year, and then finished her university in Ireland, and then she found a job there with the French embassy, and it was a nice job. She would promote French products in Ireland. So with different investors to bring over, so it could be French furniture or obviously the pastries or whatever, but that was already well implanted in Ireland. So she was traveling back and forth with Paris and Dublin, and then my dad asked her to move and pick up my dad's company in Mallorca. And unfortunately, for other reasons, that closed, and she went back to London to work for a cycling tourism company in London. And then that closed again with the second wave of COVID. So she had to go back to Nice. Myself and I was with Simon Garrans. Of course, you know Simon Garrans. He
Yeah.
called me one day and asked me if I knew someone in Nice because he wanted to open a service course. So they did a cafe. And I said, well, you know what? I think my sister's the girl to talk to. So my sister was then chosen to be the project manager, and now she manages the shop. And my little brother Alexi, who's also racing the gravel with me, is working as a gravel guide, barista, and kind of mechanic in the shop. So I've my brother Alexi, and then I have a fourth little brother who's younger again, Florian, and he's still at university. So he suffered two times leukemia, and so he's a double transplant cancer survivor. So he's lost a lot of time in school. He's lost about 6 years of school. So although he's just about to turn 23, sorry, next month, he's only in his second year of university because of the online stuff, and then obviously COVID slowed everything down. So he's still in school, but he's good. He uses an e-bike to go to school, so he's happy.
Speaking of university, did you bypass university and jump right into racing, or did you go throughout all of university and then come out and race?
No, so that was a big dilemma, and also one of the probably the biggest argument I had with my family at the time. Not so much with my mum, because my mum always believed in me in sport. She saw me as an athlete because I was everything I do. I had to be the best, or if I wasn't the best, trying to be the best. And and but my dad was like, nope. He saw me. He had different views of me. He saw me. I was always into my fashion and stuff like that, and he considered that he thought I was, because I didn't suffer hunger like he did, coming from a very poor family in Ireland. He thought that being in comfort, um, I was never going to make it as a cyclist because I was soft. That was his point of view. So when I told him I wanted to go and cycle my bicycle, and he was like, no, because cycling's too hard. You've been brought up in a okay background. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to cycle for money. I want to cycle to be a good cyclist. Where I think back then in the 70s and the 80s, sport was seen as an escape. It was, if you weren't good, or that was a way to make it. Where where I was also quite good at school, so I was quite confident that if cycling didn't make it, I'd go back to university and just have a more normal life, if you want to put it that way. So my dad he wanted to make sure that I had that diploma before I went into cycling. And back in 2003, it was quite rare to see kids turn pro at 19 or 20. There were a few. There was like Pozzato, was one. I think Nocentini was one. A few of the Italians turned pro at 19, 20, but that was about it. Very, very few others. And so when I had my leaving cert, I was like, okay, next year I'm taking a year off, and that was the first thing. So we agreed. We said, okay, I'm going to look for university that would give me time where I could go off for training. And I couldn't find a university yet. It would give me, a couple of days a trimester, but I was like, no, it's not going to work. So eventually we came to an agreement. Like I said, lucky enough, again, I was lucky that my dad at the time had the hotel. So we made a deal. I was like, okay, I'm going to work 6 months in the hotel. Don't look at the amount of hours. I'll work. If I need to do 60-hour shift, I'll do them. And then when the season come, we'll do the opposite. If one week I need to do 10 hours, well, I'll do 10 hours. The week after I need to do 20, I'll do 20. And then get kind of aim for that 30, 35 hour week, which is kind of what was recommended in France. So we said, okay, that was we shook hands on it. It was like, okay, I'll help you for 1 year because you're not professional. So you're not going to be just cycling. You need to work. And also be great because it'd be a first work experience. And I like that. I always loved the hotel. I was very sentimental about the hotel. Even as a kid when my dad was rebuilding it because it was an old ruin that we had to rebuild from scratch. And actually the first years of my pro cycling career in the winter, in November when it was kind of the real off season, I would always go back and work 10, 12 hours a week. And I'd be a waiter, I'd be helping in the kitchen, doing the handyman job, but I was already professional. But I just loved that kind of, just to be there in the hotel. So then I made the call and my dad said, okay, you got 1 year. And I said, okay, I'll go for it. I've got 1 year. So thankfully enough, that's all I needed. And 6 months later, I was already stagiaire with Cofidis.
Do you remember? Let's switch into your professional road cycling career. You've got a 15, 16, 17-year career. Some incredible teams starting out with Cofidis, which you just mentioned, all the way up to, your last team, Sunweb. An incredible body of work, of races, of victories, of highs, of lows. But rolling from the beginning, tell us about that moment that the director at Cofidis called you up and said, "Hey, we want you." Do you remember that time?
I do, and it was a really stressful moment. So I'd gone on their summer camp with them, and they've approached me during the year and says, "Okay, we're going to go on a camp in July with the team that's not riding the tour." And usually every team, and teams still do that, they take a couple of stagiaires. So I went up with them, and that went really well. And they said, "Oh, do you want to race a stagiaire with us from August?" I said, "Well, of course I do." So I rode with them, but the first 2-3 races, I did 4 races, and lucky enough, the fourth went better. But the first 3 races, I was in the classics on the cobbles in Belgium doing those kermesses and like Koolskamp and Circuit de Wallonie and all these races, and I was not quite enjoying it. It was pouring down buckets, cold, cobbles. I was like, no, I like the Tour de France stuff. I don't really like this cobbled Belgium stuff. And eventually, the fourth race was Isberg, and Isberg, I managed to make it in the final breakaway. And attacked about 5K to go solo, and I was only caught in the finishing straight, and then finished 10th. But I got my first top 10 as a stagiaire in a pro race, and at that moment it was enough. But I think without that top 10 on the last day, and also because at the end of the day I was still stagiaire and I attacked a bunch of pros in the finish, like if I was racing pro all my life with and I think that kind of impressed him at the time. And literally the next morning they said, "Okay, we're going to sign you," and that was a big relief.
Nico, we could probably spend another hour or two talking about your pro road cycling career. 24 Grand Tour participations, 65 top 10 finishes. More than a half a dozen different teams, right? From Cofidis to Credit Agricole, AG2R, Saxo Bank, Sunweb, Sky, BMC, you name it. You've ridden for some of the greatest teams around. Tell us about some of the most memorable moments during that period.
So I think in 2008 was probably my revelation as a Grand Tour contender, or at least a wannabe Grand Tour contender. And so 2008 was because I was pretty powerful, bulky at the time, still trying to drop off the weight from the rugby years. And I'd won 2 races early enough in the season, and I went to the Volta kind of as a kind of puncher rider. So initially they were kind of seeing me a little bit like a Greg Van Andermaert or a Philippe Gilbert kind of type rider, in terms that I could hang in a climb of a 5-7 minute climb. I could kind of get top 10 results in some of the stages. And I went to the Volta, and the first few days it was kind of these kicker bunch sprints, and I was getting top tens. And then our GC rider, which was Patrice Elgon, who was riding actually his last one because he retired after that race. But after a couple of days, he had a sore knee and had to stop. And then we were there with a team with no GC rider, and the guy's like, "Well, Nico, you're flying, give it a go." I was like, "Okay, cool," and that's kind of how it went. And I was with a lot of experienced riders who were very good helping me out, because again, back then, the experienced riders, when they saw upcoming rider, they saw it as a threat. There was nothing about giving your experience to the old rider, because if the old rider is more experienced, sooner or later he's taking your spot. So they were very defensive. I got lucky. There was Jess Hunt and Sebastian Eno, the two older guys that really helped me into growing into that role and keeping me calm during the race. And I finished 12th. And I was like, okay, it's promising. I wasn't a top 10, but I was only a few seconds off top 10. And I was like, okay, I think I could come back to a Grand Tour and aim for a top 10. And the year after, I went to the Tour in 2009. And I was going to go. That was probably one of my revelations, because I was dying to go to the Tour. And but the French teams make their call after the national championships, which is always the week before the Tour, so that the pressure is to its maximum. And I was like, no, I need to go. It's 2009. I'm in my fifth year pro. I need a fourth year pro. I need to make it into the 13 fifth year pro, and I wasn't quite sure. I had some health issues at the start of the year. I went and did the crits in the Caribbean. I had a stomach bug, and I was really weak for the first 3 or 4 months, and then started to get better in the second part. But I was nowhere closer to the level that I had in 2.8. But the team, it was like, okay, I'll be there. I'm in shape. I'll get it. And then they only called me in the morning, so the Monday morning after winning the Irish Championship, saying, "Okay, Nico, see you tomorrow. You're going to the Tour." So I was in the airport, and when I saw the phone call, I was like, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. So that was one of the biggest things. So winning that Irish Championship title in 2009 just had a snowball effect, because then I went to the Tour, and I think I had 5 top tens in my first Tour. I wasn't going for GC. I went for stages. Didn't win any, but I had my first second place. So I was again always potential. And I was fourth in the green jersey, and rode a lot of time in the front of the bunch defending Nuscentini's yellow jersey. So my teammate was in yellow for I think 10 days. So all that kind of brought to the thing where, okay, 210, I can go again and be more confident. And then I was straight away a team leader for AG2R, and then kind of things went on, and I was sixth in the Vuelta that year. Another key point was in 2015, 13, when I won my first Vuelta stage. And a couple of days later, taking up the oval jersey for a day. And because 2006 again, I was second in the stage. 2008, I was second in the stage in the Vuelta, and I've had 3 seconds in Grand Tour stages, and I was still not winning at Grand Tour stages. And I wanted to be a Grand Tour stage winner. When you come up and do an introduction on Wikipedia or whatever, it's like I wanted to have that line, Grand Tour stage winner. It didn't matter how many other races I won. A Grand Tour stage is a Grand Tour stage. And so once that was done, I was like, okay, deal. Now I know I've done something a little bit more special.
Nico, some of the guests that we have on the show are fortunate enough to participate in world championships, in Olympics, in Grand Tours, and I like to ask a question that sometimes varies. The answers vary. Would you rather have Olympic gold or world championship rainbow stripes?
That's a tough one. It's a tough one because when you're world champion, well, in a way, it's only for the year, but you have the privilege of wearing that very special jersey, and you get the stripes for the whole of your career. And in the world of cycling, until very recent years, it was by far the ultimate, okay, the yellow jersey, but the ultimate one day race. Olympian, when you say to people you're Olympian, don't even think about winning a medal. When you say you're Olympian, people look at you with like, you're from a different planet. The grand public, because that's what the grand public refers to. So if you're a gold medal Olympian, I think in your real life has a much bigger impact than a world champion on the bike. So I don't know. I'd still say Olympian because it's even more rare because they're every 4 years, and they've cycling wasn't professional cycling wasn't a big thing in the Olympics till very recent years. So I think they're more rare, but yeah, it's a tough one. I'd go for Olympian, gold medal Olympian.
All right, let's stay with the Olympics because you have participated in 4 Olympics. Tell us about some of the cool highlights of participating in the Olympics. I mean, it is special. Every 4 years, global stage. And you get represent your country. 4 Olympics. That's pretty impressive.
4 Olympics, yeah, and I'll give you. The truth is, I wished I could have gone and did 5. I missed out on Athens because Ireland didn't want to send me because they said I was too young. And then missing out in Paris. Okay, Paris was a long stretch. It was another 3 years of pro cycling to do. But missing out in Athens was I probably got my bottom kicked around, but it was just to go there, and especially in Athens. And I had done the European Championship was the test run for the Olympics the year before. So I had gone on the course and raced there. But the Olympics was especially my first one because going to China, we flew quite a bit early. And I was there with my compatriot, Philip Dagdim, and the two of us, we've grown up together since we're 14, racing each other every week. We shared an apartment together in Marseille when we were in the under 23 team before making it pro. And we were always roomed together already since juniors in our rooms, and we did world championships. So to be there at the Olympics, the two of us was like, this is cool. Like it was like a kid's little dream. It was great to see the village. The village is the most amazing thing, but the food court is the most amazing thing because you could be sitting there and you got the NBA All-Stars sitting beside you with a lot of times they love a bit of a burger, but it was unreal to see. And then Nadal's walking past you and Federer's on the other side. And then you see Usain Bolt at the other side of the thing. And it was like, wow. and everyone's pretty relaxed before the opening ceremony. So, it's incredible to see how in that environment the superstars, global superstars, not cyclists, global superstars are so accessible, and they will take a photo and this and that. And especially back then, 2008, there was no COVID or social distancing. Like you could go and hug the guy basically, or the female athlete. But it was surreal. And my biggest regrets in the Olympics is I've never attended an opening or closing ceremony. Cycling being the first event, usually we were trying to be in bed early because we could get the fireworks, and it was really hard to get a whole night's sleep. And also because cycling races are always early, so it was like you're up at 6 a.m. to go for breakfast. So it's always been my biggest regret was not going to any of the ceremonies. And I was like, and it's not that I've been once; I've been there 4 times, and I haven't been able to go and see any events actually other than the cycling. I saw the training because also because I was always planning to do the Vuelta. So literally once the race was over, I'll be in an airplane coming back to Europe to go to the Vuelta. And for example, my cousin Dan, his partner or wife now, she did the Rio Olympics, and that had focused on the tour, and was able to stay 2 weeks in Rio. And when he talks to me about the experience of going to see some of the events and supporting her, that's something I didn't get to experience, and hopefully I'll go back as a manager at some point.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We've had a few athletes that have been to the Olympics on the show, and they all share a similar experience that, of course, the Olympics are amazing, but the timing and such has always worked out. And you're not the only one where they too didn't get to go to the opening or closing ceremonies. And I had no idea that that was a thing. I thought everyone went to the opening and everyone went to the closing, but it's not true.
No, unfortunately, and like you mentioned, on the Saturday, there's probably 10 different events, and it's incredible because also even the vibe in the whole village. You know, I've been told by some of my other friends that, and some other sports, when you've done the Olympics, that's saying you're done for a couple of months, and then you can start rethinking about points for the next Olympic. So a lot of the athletes in different sports stay there as a mini holiday because it's just amazing. And then as the days go by and as the riders get eliminated or they're not in contention for a medal anymore, the tension kind of goes down and people start to relax. And at party, there's some amazing atmosphere and going on like in the second or third week of the opening of the village that I never got to experience. When I was there, everyone like just like the days before, when you go pre-opening of the village, everyone's smiling and happy, and the next thing, once they've done the ceremony or whatever, it's just like square.
We could, of course, talk forever about all of your accomplishments and successes and victories and stuff like that, but I'm really curious to learn about some of the struggles or challenges. I mean, a 16, 17, 18-year career in professional road cycling, lots of highs, lots of lows. What were some of what's one of the biggest struggles or challenges that you had to overcome throughout a pro road racing career?
So one of the, at least in terms of status or whatever, one of my biggest frustrations was I was extremely reliable. I could pull out performances, but I rarely won. And that was my biggest, not regret, but my biggest weight on my shoulders. And I have a lot of,
Right.
I've also, even my choice of racing, sometimes like, did I make the right career choices? Did I maybe chase GC too soon and should have tried going for stages, rather than always focusing on a top 10 GC? Or, because at the end of the day, is like, was a 64, 65 top 10s in a Grand Tour stage, which is huge, but also makes me a very huge loser because I've only won 2 of those 64 times that I made it in the top 10. Where, for example, you have riders like Philippe Gilbert. I think he's probably got 30 or 40 top 10s in the Vuelta, in the Grand Tour stage, but he's won 5 or 6. So
Right.
there was just something missing where obviously when you're in a Grand Tour that you're with the best of the best. And it was just every time there was someone that was slightly better, than me. And I've had a couple of seconds, but that's like my biggest frustration was that.
I actually have it in my notes to ask you, but I was a little afraid to ask you. Let's talk about Dancing with the Stars. So you were in Dancing with the Stars Ireland, and I saw some of the pictures. It's amazing. Tell us, why, how?
So literally speaking, about a month after I announced my retirement, mid-October, I got a phone call from a sporting agency in Ireland and saying, look, Dancing with the Stars have contacted us and they were trying to get in to reach you. Are you interested? It says Dancing with the Stars. Like, well, first, what are the dates? Because I was going to do at Tour Romandy, Pays Basque on TV, and then helping out Andrew essentially with the mountain bike, Trinity with the Trinity mountain bike. I was like, okay, but I don't want to let anyone down. So when's the date? It says, it's from January to February. It's like, oh, brilliant. Nothing's happening in January, February. So where do I sign? Only after that initial excitement, I realized what I put myself into. And then I was like, okay, I start watching videos on YouTube and trying to understand how it worked. And I was like, oh, this is tougher than what I expected. And then I went to, and also I thought I was going to be a little bit better and not as shy as I happened to be. And so they do a mini training camp. So the first dance, you get to practice it 3 weeks instead of 1. So you go and you kind of do a crash course in dancing before Christmas. So you have like a 2-week window where you're free to, the teacher is, your pro dancer is available and you go and you do a few steps. So I had gone back to Ireland, done those 2 weeks, and then the show starts, and you have another week to polish your initial dance. And I was lucky to have a very fast, very entertaining dance where there was a lot of facial expression. You had to, and I always remember when I got it done that the judge, I couldn't even describe it in any better words than the judge. It was like you're a rabbit caught in the headlights. And I was like, yes, that's what I am. Sometimes those comments from the judge could be quite upsetting, but there I was like, no, that's what I am. I'm literally a rabbit caught in the headlights. I don't know where I'm petrified. And you could just see it. And I don't know, didn't make one mistake in terms of steps. I was just or too fast or too slow because I was so focused on my steps. I was not even hearing the music. It was just, I was like doing my steps because I knew them by heart, but they weren't. So there's a moment in my first one where I'm a little bit ahead, I'm a little bit behind, and I'm a little bit ahead, depending. It's like, okay, because I remember, I could remember, like, for example, if it went, I was like that movement. So I could refocus and recalibrate my timing on the certain beat. But in between those moments, I would get completely lost. Luckily enough, week after week, I also managed to enjoy it, because initially I wasn't enjoying it. I was like, what did I put myself through? It's hard work. You have to commit to the show. It's 7 days a week, and you do about 5 to 7 hours of dancing a day. So it's really intense. So that's why, like, often you see celebrities who get injured during the show if they're not kind of athletic or not used to it, because it's very tiring for, like, so Monday, Tuesdays when we start the steps of the new dance. So you're not even dancing, you're just doing the steps in front of the mirror, the basics they call. And in the evening, on Tuesday evening, I was getting these headaches from another world. Just from the mental stress. It was like worse than having exams at university or at school.
Wow.
And then things would get on, and then you just had this excitement on the Sunday, and the fear to come across as a fool or make a fool of yourself. And I think that was my biggest fear, because you're on live TV, it's prime time, Sunday evening, biggest show in Ireland, and you're doing something that you're not very good at. And it's also tough when you've been half decent at something during your career, where every single day you're told that you're not good enough and you need to do better. And again, and I know that's the way dances work, and it's always about be better, do this better again and again, and no, and you're bad at this, you're bad at that, and that was terrible. And again, but you're not kind of used to that in cycling. You don't have someone after you every day saying you're bad. Maybe at the end of the year they might not re-sign you, but it was just mentally, it's challenging when you just. You could repeat it hours in front of the mirror, and if you can't get it right, you can't get it right. And at the beginning, I didn't know my left arm from my right arm. And once I got the arms right, then it was time to do my feet. And when the feet were right, I had to do my face, but also remember where the camera is and the position of the body, but also where the other pro dancer is. So there was a lot going on, but it was the most, in a way, almost life-changing experience I've ever had. It's taught me so much in my post-cycling career. Is giving me a lot more confidence in my TV work. From that in Ireland, obviously it broadened my audience. I wasn't just cyclist anymore. I was also kind of, not a lot of people watch Dancing with the Stars, but from kids to elderly people. And now, for example, when I was going in shopping centers in Ireland, it would be like young 14, 15-year-olds who'd kind of shake the hands of their parents. Oh, that's Nico, where before that never happened. So, and what I was, when I started it, I was like, okay, I know I'm not going to win this, because some of the, celebrities or singers, and they have to, basically they understand music. So all they have to do is kind of get the steps. But for me, it was about living the full experience. So it was like, my stress was making it through 3 or 4 weeks, so as I can at least have the experience of Dancing with the Stars. And I made it through 10 weeks, and I had an amazing time. And actually, on our last dance, we were on a dance off, but the other dancer was great, and I kind of knew that was my time to go. And Karen, my pro dancer, kind of, we felt that was our last dance, and we weren't even eliminated. But when the dance finished, we hugged each other, and both of us were in tears, not because we were eliminated, because the adventure was over. It was so intense in terms of the emotions. And when a dance is finished, the adrenaline rush is like if you win a bike race. The only thing is, when you win a bike race, it lasts for months. In this thing, literally until the judge start talking to you 2 minutes after the high has gone back down. But the adrenaline rush from that minute 40 that you're dancing is really undescribable.
Nico, we're almost out of time now, but I did want to ask you about a few more things. The first one is, as it relates to community, I know one of the things that you've become involved in is the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Make a Wish actually, I used to run events in Ireland. I had a grand fundo, and initially every year I would choose a different charity, a different cause, and eventually I decided that it makes sense to kind of more and focus with one rather than kind of just always
Right.
turn over, because it meant that I could get more involved during the year as well, and do other stuff. Make a Wish made a lot of sense. My brother suffered two leukemias, and actually, it's this destiny happened that he had made a wish back then when he was back in hospital, and his wish got granted this year. So it's funny, but at the time, his wish was going to Euro Disney. So at the time, I think he was 16 or 17. And obviously, in the meantime, COVID happened, everything closed down, and he got his wish. So he went this year at the age of 23 to Euro Disney as his
Wow.
wish from Make a Wish, but it was France. It was Make a Wish France, but it was funny that it's pure coincidence that it happened this year, but it's just nice. And so yeah, so I like the idea of the whole Make a Wish Foundation, which is obviously kids who are um, life threatening or end of life sicknesses, and they get to ask a wish, and sometimes, most times, is granted. But having had a brother who could have died at the age of 7 when he had his first leukemia, I was really sensible to that to that way of working and how the charity operated, because I'm pretty sure at the age of 7 my brother had a millions of wish because he had nothing done in his life at that point. So
Yeah.
they approached me at one of the events, and everything went really well. And then after that, during COVID, in Europe, everything was really strict. You were barely allowed outside from your house, so obviously funding was becoming critical. It was, if most of these organizations get funded through events, if it's runs, cycles, rallies, but it's mainly with organizing events. And obviously, there was no events to be organized, and we weren't allowed to organize any events for almost 3 years. So during the lockdown, we started doing a few online gigs where I would do a few challenges, a few videos, because people were allowed to go out for a 5K run, for example, as long as they were in a perimeter of 2 kilometers from the house and stuff like that. So
Right.
I would just do a video or a Swift ride, and saying, okay, if you get an hour and upload your thing, they had sponsors who would commit and paying per kilometer run or per kilometer cycled. So we tried to kind of continue raising through social media. We had auctions. So I mainly initially helped, especially during COVID when we weren't allowed to travel, on the fundraising side, and kind of using contacts and my name and my popularity on social media to create something for them. I would also do some videos to some of the young Irish boys and girls who were into cycling, and encourage them to keep on fighting and stay strong. So that's kind of the
Nice.
involvement that I would do those years. And this year is the same. I once in a while get a call, and saying, can you promote this event? Because it's not only about me; it's about trying to use me to promote other events.
Right.
Because I've a massive Irish following, obviously, being Irish. So for me, it's just about giving awareness that people. I won't be present at a running event. I'm here in traveling the world with gravel racing, but I'll say, please see you in Dublin at 8 p.m. Come in for a good cause. Come and do a 10K run,
Yeah. Yeah.
and support the event. So that's kind of what I try and do, is give as much awareness to the charity as possible.
So great. Such a great organization. And to leverage your recognition is amazing. Thanks for doing that.
Thanks.
Nico, there's another community effort that you're involved in that's a little bit community and a little bit commercial, but is it true that you own a few bike shops in and around the UK?
Yes, so I half own a bike shop in Ireland, which is more a multi-branded, multi-sport shop. So initially we started just with so we opened during the pandemic, so it was very difficult. And I
Yeah,
thought that there was also a few bike shops already in Cork, down really at the bottom part of Ireland. And we were like, well, let's try and do something. I don't want to be competition or bad competition to some of the other shops who are there for years. I wanted to try and bring something new.
right.
It's a great hub for triathlon. So I thought that it'd be a good idea to bring some triathlon items. And then from there, obviously now everyone's into yoga and Pilates and all this fitness. So we started bringing in all the apparel for running also, but obviously for kind of more to the fitness or the well-being kind of clothing and apparel with obviously your typical swimsuits and the very thick ones because the Irish Sea is very cold. So that's and we do kid
Oh yeah.
bikes and everything. So that's kind of or my shop in Ireland, and then in the UK with my best friend from school and another couple of investors, we started this bike brand, sorry, this shop brand called LAP, LAP. So everyone was like, oh, tour this and tour that, and I was like, well, the English for tour is lap, isn't it? And then obviously, when I'm out training and doing an effort, you do a lap or you go out for a
Yeah,
lap, and they
right.
go training in Richmond Park, so they also do laps. So it was all this kind of thing about, all right, why don't we just call it the English word of tour, which is lap, and that's
Nice.
that's different. We only do kind of high end bikes. It's more of a niche. The whole idea was about an experience where when you go and buy a handbag, they give you a glass of champagne and a tap on the shoulder and hello, Mr. Roche, how are you?
Right.
Good to see you again. You go and buy a $10,000 bike and you barely get a free bottle. So we were trying to change a little bit that where there is an experience when you go and buy your high end bike the same way you buy any luxury good on the planet with a quality service. And in the UK, it's extremely difficult to find labor. So we didn't want to specialize in clothing and accessories, but to be really good at
Yeah.
just selling bikes only. So we have some of our staff who are trained, and they know all their tech about the bikes and how to help the customer. But you can't talk to them about clothing because we formatted them to be able to be good at bikes only.
And so you have three locations in the UK, and then the your other store, Roca, is in Ireland,
Is
right?
yes. So in London, in Edinburgh, and then in Manchester.
Do you expect to open up more over time?
Yes, in Ireland, I don't think so. I think we're happy with what we're doing. It's a much more
Yeah.
smaller market, and like I said, it's a different idea of a bike shop. But in the UK, we're trying. We've opened two this year, and we're really trying to expand. One of our key ideas is to develop service centers, just because there's so much online sales
Yeah.
that we think that today's service centers, specific service centers, are also key, where you can buy your bike online and actually go to a bike shop without the mechanic giving out to you because you didn't buy it in his own shop, because this would be a specific
Yeah.
shop that's kind of made for all this online stuff. So we've loads of ideas, and we're trying to develop as much as possible. At the moment, mainly in the UK, but we have a just because they're geographically, all my business partners are in the UK,
Yeah.
but the idea is to grow elsewhere. The first idea of the shop was because of my best friend. He always thought about my retirement, and it was getting closer and closer every year. So it was like, I'm gonna make sure we've other businesses together. We have fast foods in London, healthy fast food. Just with the same group of eight investors, we've kind of stuck together, and the idea was like
Nice.
if anything happened to me and I wanted to go to London and live in London, would I have an option to run the shop? So that's how the whole idea was kind of grow. It was like, okay, don't worry, Nico, when you finish your career, you're not gonna be without work, you will always have a place where you can have a proper job and run the shop for the business. So that was the initial idea, and then it was like, okay, now I'm doing lots of gravel and everything. Let's open more shops.
Smart move, and good for you for, getting a bunch of friends to do it together with too, right? I mean, that's got to be fun.
Yeah, initially, that's just my best friend from school, and then the other partners. I actually haven't met the last two. I've only met the other three in the middle, and we all initially started investing from, like I said, in this food franchise, which is actually struggling at the moment because the food industry is just so much more difficult at the moment. Everything is changing,
Sure.
especially in the city in the heart of London. And that's how we kind of just met through that randomly with investing with my best friend. They were clients of his when he used to work in private banking, and then we just kind of connected and grew from there.
All right, Nico, now we are almost out of time, and there's just one last section for us to do. It's our speed round. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes,
Coffee or tea?
coffee,
Tacos or burritos?
burritos,
Spicy or mild?
mild.
Cold weather or hot weather?
Oh, definitely hot weather.
Rain or snow?
Snow.
Mountains or the beach?
Is there a joker somewhere?
No.
Okay. Oh.
You can choose one though.
Yeah, I can choose one. You see, I'm spoiled here because I live close to the mountains and the
You-
beach, and especially in the cycling. When you're thinking purely about cycling, I think if there's a beach and a mountain on and there's a road, I'm in a perfect place. Um, I think I like to live by the sea. I've always lived by the sea, so beach,
All right. Cities or suburbs?
cities,
Cars or trucks?
cars,
Pavement or dirt?
pavement. Said recently,
Gloves or gloveless?
gloves,
Clipped in or flat pedals?
clipped in,
Low pressure or high pressure in your tires?
high pressure.
Man, old school.
Old school, but I'm getting used to the low pressure. Like the gravel has completely changed my way of seeing things.
Fix it yourself or take it to a mechanic?
Mechanic,
And then last question, dogs or cats?
dogs.
Nicholas Roche, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for sharing your stories, your journey, your successes, your highs, your lows, your investments. You are awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Great to talk to you.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.